At 4:17 in the morning on October 14th, 2019, every departure screen inside the North Terminal of Eastbridge International Airport changed at once. Gate 42 became Gate 18. A flight to Madrid appeared to be boarding for Cairo. A canceled service to Prague suddenly showed final call. And on the public address system, a calm female voice announced that all passengers should proceed to the nearest security checkpoint for a mandatory evacuation drill. There was no fire, no terrorist attack, no power failure. The airport was open, the runways were active, and 31,000 passengers were moving through the building exactly as they were told. Except nobody at the airport had issued those instructions. For 22 minutes, one person redirected the flow of an entire international airport using nothing but a stolen access badge, a forged maintenance request, and a voice that did not belong to him. He did not break through the front gates. He did not plant explosives. He did not even enter the control tower. He simply convinced the people inside the airport that he was already supposed to be there. By the time security officers realized the evacuation was fake, 14 flights had been delayed. 3 aircraft had been moved away from their gates. 600 passengers were standing on the wrong side of security, and one airport employee had opened a restricted communications cabinet with her own key. The airport had not been hacked in the way movies usually show it. It had been persuaded. So how does one man trick hundreds of trained employees, bypass a security system valued at $48 million, and make an entire airport obey instructions that never existed? And why does the answer begin 6 months earlier? With a broken printer and a man who had never been arrested before. His name was Adrian Vale. At least that was the name on the first identity document investigators found. The rest of the story is much harder to prove. In January 2019, Vale was 34 years old and living in a rented apartment above a closed bakery in the industrial district of Belhaven. The building had no elevator, no security cameras in the hallway, and a landlord who accepted cash because, as he later told police, Adrian was quiet and never complained. Vale had worked in airport technology, not as a pilot, not as a security officer, not even as a senior engineer. For 7 years, he repaired document scanners, boarding pass printers, badge readers, and the small but essential machines that connect the public side of an airport to the restricted side. The job looked boring from the outside. That was the advantage. Airport security is built around obvious threats: weapons, fake passports, suspicious luggage, people trying to enter through doors marked staff only. But modern airports also depend on invisible trust. Thousands of employees need temporary access, emergency overrides, contractor passes, shared radio channels, and systems that communicate with one another, because a 3-minute delay can cost an airline tens of thousands of dollars. Baggage operations, gate management, fuel scheduling, passenger announcements, security checkpoints, maintenance dispatch, airline desks, all of them are connected by procedures. And procedures are only as strong as the person who believes the person on the other end of the phone. Vale understood that better than most. He had not started as a criminal. His former colleagues described him as intense, technically gifted, and deeply resentful of management. He believed the airport was a machine designed by committees. Every weakness was documented somewhere. Every shortcut had a reason. Every emergency exception had an owner. And if you knew enough owners, you could move through the machine without forcing anything. His first major conflict with Eastbridge happened in March 2019. A software update caused 2,400 boarding passes to print with the wrong flight numbers. Vale reported the problem 3 times. Nothing happened for 9 days. Then a manager blamed him for failing to escalate it. Vale was fired. The official reason was repeated procedural noncompliance. His friend said the translation was basically, he asked questions in public. For several weeks, he searched for work. He applied to airport contractors, logistics firms, security companies, and a railway operator. Nobody hired him. His previous employer had marked him as difficult. Not dangerous, not dishonest, just difficult. That label followed him everywhere. By May, he was behind on rent. By June, he had started returning to Eastbridge as a contractor, not under his own name. He registered a small company called V-Line Systems, a business that existed only on paper and had no office, no employees, and 1 prepaid mobile number. The company offered emergency maintenance for communication equipment. It sounded legitimate because airport infrastructure is full of companies that sound invented. The first request arrived on a Tuesday at 9:12 in the morning. A printer near the staff entrance was producing blank security labels. V-Line Systems sent an email to the airport facilities department. The message included the correct equipment number, the correct location, and a description of the problem copied from an old internal ticket. No malware, no malicious attachment, just a maintenance request that looked like it had been written by someone who knew what they were talking about. A facilities coordinator replied within 11 minutes. She asked for a work order number. Vail sent one. It was not real, but it matched the numbering format used by the airport's maintenance contractor. The coordinator approved a temporary access badge. For 52 minutes, Adrian Vail walked through a restricted service corridor carrying a black tool case, a printed work order, and a fluorescent vest purchased from an online safety supplier. He repaired nothing. Instead, he watched. Which doors opened automatically? Which doors required a badge? Which officers looked at faces and which looked only at the color of the pass? He watched how employees handled radio calls, how contractors were challenged, and how quickly people stepped aside when someone appeared to be solving a problem. This is the part that makes the story uncomfortable. The badge did not defeat the airport. The badge worked exactly as intended. A real employee had approved it. A real department had logged it. A real security officer had checked it against a real system. The airport had created a believable identity for a person who did not deserve one. And then it trusted its own database. Vail returned 3 more times. On the second visit, he asked an employee where to find the old passenger information relay. On the third, he claimed a communications cabinet was overheating. On the fourth, he arrived carrying 2 coffees and a box of pastries for the morning maintenance team. No one remembers the pastries as suspicious. That is the point. People expect hackers to behave like villains. They expect black hoodies, strange code, locked rooms, and dramatic silence. Vail behaved like a contractor who was already late. By August, he had mapped the airport's human routines, not every computer. The people. He knew that overnight supervisors accepted phone calls faster than written requests. He knew that airline staff trusted anyone who used the correct internal abbreviations. He knew that security officers rarely questioned a maintenance worker during a technical interruption, because delaying a repair could create a larger safety problem. Most importantly, he learned that Eastbridge had a disaster protocol called Amber Corridor. It was designed for situations in which passengers needed to be moved quickly without causing panic. A chemical smell, a suspicious package, a ventilation problem, a security incident that had not yet been classified. The protocol did not close the airport. It redirected people. Certain gates were paused. Public announcements were made. Security staff created temporary lanes. Airline employees moved passengers toward designated holding areas while specialists investigated the threat. It was meant to prevent chaos. Vail realized it could also create chaos with official language. In September, he obtained a copy of the procedure. Investigators never proved exactly how. The document was stored in a contractor portal with a password policy that required 8 characters, 1 number, and 1 capital letter. That sounds secure until you understand that hundreds of employees were encouraged to use the same naming pattern for temporary accounts. The portal was not penetrated through a spectacular exploit. An account was reused, a password was guessed, a temporary login was never disabled. Sometimes the most expensive systems in the world are protected by habits that cost nothing to change. Inside the document, Vail found the phrases used by airport supervisors during an Amber Corridor event. He found the sequence of calls. He found the names of the departments involved. He found a backup number for the public address control room. And he found something more valuable than all of it, a gap. During an Amber Corridor response, the airport's central command center could authorize temporary instructions from a remote communications desk. The desk was normally used when the main control room was overloaded. It could schedule announcements, update certain gate displays, and send messages to airline operations. It could not control aircraft. It could not open the runway. It could not release passengers from customs. But it could make an airport look like it was operating under orders. That was enough. The first test happened on September 27th. At 2:06 in the morning, a message arrived in the inbox of a night shift airline coordinator. It said a group of passengers had been incorrectly assigned to a closed gate. The coordinator was asked to confirm a list of 18 names. The list contained real passengers from a flight that had departed 3 hours earlier. The coordinator called the number in the message. Vail answered as a technical dispatcher. He knew the flight number. He knew the gate. He knew the coordinator's name because it appeared in the email signature. When she asked him to repeat the work order, he did it without hesitation. Then he told her the problem had been resolved. It had not. The test was not about access. It was about confidence. Would an employee accept a correction from a person who sounded like the system? She did. That night, Vale learned that the airport's human verification process was not a wall. It was a conversation, and conversations could be staged. But here's what Vale did not understand. The airport was not merely a collection of tired employees in outdated portals. It was also a living organization. When one part became suspicious, the others could react. In early October, a security analyst noticed 3 contractor accounts linked to the same recovery telephone number. The accounts belonged to 3 different companies. One handled lighting, one handled baggage equipment, one handled communications. The analyst sent a warning to the identity management team. The warning was marked low priority because all 3 accounts had been created through approved channels. That decision would later become one of the most criticized moments in the investigation. Not because the analyst failed, because the system had already classified the evidence as harmless. A week later, Vale placed his final call. It was 10:34 on the evening of October 13th. He contacted the airport's overnight facilities desk and reported a fault in a communications cabinet near the North Terminal. He used a contractor ID associated with V-Line Systems. The desk supervisor asked why the issue had not been reported by the airport's own monitoring system. Vale answered that the monitoring system was the problem. That sentence mattered. It turned a technical alert into a technical investigation. The supervisor dispatched an employee to inspect the cabinet. Vale then called back, claiming the employee had found signs of overheating. He asked the supervisor to activate a temporary maintenance restriction near gates 18 through 46. The supervisor hesitated. Vale did not pressure him. He gave him a reason. If the cabinet failed, the public address system could broadcast incorrect information. Better to isolate the area now than evacuate half the terminal later. That was not a threat. It was a plausible concern. The restriction was approved at 10:48. Vale had created the first official-looking fact in the chain. A real employee had documented a problem. From there, every later instruction could point backward. At 1:41 in the morning, a second message entered the system. It appeared to come from the airport's emergency coordination office. The message referenced Amber Corridor and requested a controlled passenger movement exercise beginning at 4:15. The airport ran drills all the time. Fire drills, evacuation drills, security exercises, technology tests. The message did not ask anyone to do something impossible. It asked them to do something normal at an unusual time. That is how the operation began. At 4:03, Vale entered the North Terminal through a staff door using a temporary badge issued under a contractor account. At 4:09, he reached a restricted communications room. At 4:12, he connected a small device to an unused maintenance port. The device did not take over the airport network. It did not need to. It allowed Vale to place instructions into a queue that trusted messages from approved maintenance systems. The queue was supposed to be used for testing. During an emergency, test messages were not supposed to reach public displays. But a configuration change made months earlier had combined the test and live scheduling systems. The error had not caused a problem because nobody had abused it. Until Vale. At 4:17, the screens changed. At 4:18, the first announcement played. At 4:19, security officers began moving passengers away from the eastern concourse. At 4:21, a supervisor called the control room to ask whether the drill had been authorized. The control room said yes. Someone had sent them the same instruction. The illusion was complete. For 22 minutes, each department confirmed the others. Security saw airport staff redirecting passengers. Airline staff saw security moving in formation. The communications desk saw approved messages in its own queue. The control room saw a maintenance restriction and assumed the public announcement was part of the response. No one was lying to everyone. Everyone was telling the truth about the small piece in front of them. The system assembled those pieces into a false reality. Above ground, passengers complained, filmed the screens, and asked why a flight to Madrid had been moved 3 times. Behind the scenes, the 3 aircraft were being held at remote positions because their gates appeared to be inside a restricted zone. Ground crews moved them to alternate stands. One Flight 8 crew waited 17 minutes for clearance to board because the gate display showed a security lock. At 4:26, a child began crying near the closed checkpoint. At 4:28, an airport employee opened the communications cabinet Vale had claimed was overheating. She found no fire, no smoke, no damaged equipment, only a black device attached beneath the panel. The employee did not remove it. She called security. That call broke the spell. Within 11 minutes, the main control room disconnected the remote communications desk. The false announcement stopped. The screens froze, then went black. Security officers began asking the question they should have asked at the beginning. Who authorized Amber Corridor? No one could answer. The airport was locked down. Vail was gone. His badge had been used at 403. It had not been used to exit. For 11 minutes, investigators believed that he was still inside the terminal. They searched maintenance rooms, rest areas, service tunnels, and airline offices. They checked bathrooms and baggage corridors. They sealed the parking structure. Then a camera operator found something strange. At 4:07, a man wearing a fluorescent vest entered the communications corridor. At 4:24, the same corridor showed an empty hallway. At 4:25, a cleaning cart rolled through the frame. The cart was pushed by a different person. The cameras had not recorded Vail leaving because he had not walked out. He had hidden inside a laundry transport container used by an overnight cleaning contractor. The container was loaded onto a service vehicle at 4:45, 6 minutes after the false announcement stopped. No weapon, no dramatic chase, just a man folded beneath uniforms and towels, while airport security searched the building above him. The vehicle passed through the service gate at 4:52. The guard checked the driver's pass. He did not inspect the container. By sunrise, Adrian Vail was 19 kilometers away. The airport reopened in stages at 6:52. The official explanation described the incident as an unauthorized systems test. That language lasted less than 3 hours. By noon, passengers had uploaded videos of the false gate announcements. By evening, the story had reached national television. A hacker had taken over an airport. That headline was not technically accurate, but it was emotionally correct. Eastbridge had not lost control of aircraft. The runways had not been breached. No, passenger data had been stolen and no plane had been redirected. Yet the public saw something more disturbing than a shutdown. They saw the airport speaking with an official voice while nobody in charge knew who was holding the microphone. The investigation expanded rapidly. Police traced V-Line systems to a rented mailbox. The mailbox contained invoices, empty envelopes, and one broken printer. The printer was the same model used by Eastbridge's contractor network. That detail seemed meaningless until investigators examined its internal memory. It contained fragments of maintenance labels, equipment numbers, and 2 partial employee names. Vail had used the printer to reproduce the texture and formatting of airport work orders. He had not stolen a master document. He had built a library of small, authentic details. A logo here, a department code there, the wording of a routine request, the right amount of bureaucratic boredom. That was his method, not impersonation through brilliance, impersonation through accumulation. The more details he got right, the less anyone noticed the one thing that was false, his identity. On October 17th, police searched the apartment above the bakery. They found 3 laptops, 6 prepaid phones, a collection of access badges, airport maps, maintenance manuals, and a notebook with 47 names written in blue ink. At the top of the notebook was a sentence: "People do not protect systems, they protect their assumptions." The sentence was not a confession, but it explained everything. The laptops were encrypted. The phones were wiped. The access badges had been cut into small pieces and placed in separate trash bags. Vail was careful. He was not invisible. The problem was that he had left a pattern in a place he considered harmless. On September 27th, during his first test, he had called the airline coordinator from a public phone near a train station. Investigators recovered a station camera showing him standing beside a vending machine. The image was blurry, his face was partially hidden, but the camera also captured something on his wrist, a bright orange fitness band. 6 days later, a traffic camera recorded the same orange band outside a contractor warehouse. 2 days after that, security footage showed a man with the band entering a hotel under the name Adrian Voss. Vail, and the registered owner of V-Line Systems, had one connection: an old employee directory from Eastbridge. He had not stolen the directory. He had once been listed in it. The same record contained his old work email, his department, and a recovery number that was still attached to the contractor accounts. He had spent months using the airport's forgotten information to recreate its voice. And the airport had spent months leaving his own voice inside the machine. On October 21st, Vail was arrested in a rented room 240 kilometers from Eastbridge. There was no shootout. He was eating noodles from a paper container when officers entered. On the table sat a train ticket, $20,700 in cash, and a USB drive hidden inside the battery compartment of a digital alarm clock. The drive contained no stolen passenger data, no explosive plans, no list of targets. It contained a copy of the Amber Corridor procedure, marked with handwritten notes. Some notes were technical, some were personal. Next to the line requiring a second verbal confirmation, Vale had written, "Nobody wants to be the difficult one." That line became the center of the trial. Prosecutors described him as a dangerous criminal who had endangered aviation and created conditions for a mass panic. They argued that the airport's systems could have been manipulated further, that aircraft operations had been disrupted, and that the public could not know whether his intentions had stopped at deception. Vale's defense argued that no one had been injured, no aircraft had been commandeered, and no money had been stolen. The defense called it a demonstration. The court called it a coordinated attack on critical infrastructure. The distinction mattered because it raised a larger question. If a hacker enters a system but never changes a flight, has he attacked aviation? If he changes the information people depend on, is that less dangerous? Or is it the same kind of power applied to a different layer? In February 2021, Adrian Vale was sentenced to 11 years in prison. He was convicted of unauthorized access, fraud, disruption of transport services, and falsifying emergency communications. The court rejected the claim that the operation was victimless. The airport lost an estimated $3.8 million in delays, overtime, inspections, and compensation. One airline canceled 22 connections. Hundreds of passengers missed onward flights. A hospital transfer was delayed because a medical courier was trapped on the wrong side of a security closure. No one died. But no violence is not the same as no consequences. After the trial, Eastbridge rebuilt its contractor access system. Temporary badges expired after 4 hours. Emergency messages required 2 independent confirmations. Test systems were separated from live systems. Staff were trained to challenge familiar language, familiar uniforms, and familiar voices. The changes cost $17 million. The airport also removed the remote communications desk. The system had been designed to keep information moving during a crisis. Instead, it had become the perfect place to manufacture one. But here's the part people still argue about. Did Vale expose a weakness, or did he create one? Some security researchers called the operation a masterclass in social engineering. They said he understood a truth that many organizations refuse to accept. The most dangerous access is not always a password. Sometimes it is credibility. Others saw something less romantic. A man who wanted revenge found a system full of ordinary people, then used their professionalism against them. The receptionist who approved a badge was doing her job. The supervisor who accepted a maintenance warning was trying to prevent a failure. The employee who moved passengers was following procedure. Vale did not outsmart every person in the airport. He made each person believe someone else had already checked. That is how large institutions fail. Not with one enormous mistake, with dozens of small, reasonable decisions that line up in the wrong direction. And that is why the story reaches beyond Eastbridge International. Airports are obvious targets because everyone understands what they represent. A central machine of movement. Rules, gates, cameras, passports, screens, uniforms, authority. But the same weakness exists in hospitals, banks, shipping ports, energy companies, universities, and governments. They all rely on identity. They all rely on urgency. They all rely on people who sound as if they belong. A system can have encryption, biometric locks, segmented networks, and millions of dollars in security hardware. Yet if an employee is afraid of delaying a repair, embarrassed to ask a basic question, or trained to obey the logo before verifying the person, the attack has already begun. Vale understood something that the airport did not. Perception is an access credential. And once enough people share the same false perception, it becomes operational reality. The most unsettling detail came months after his arrest. Investigators discovered that the black device found inside the communications cabinet had remained connected for only 14 minutes. It had not copied the airport's internal network. It had not captured passwords. It had not opened every door. It had done one job. It had placed a believable message into the right queue at the right time. Then it stopped. The airport's own systems carried the lie from department to department. The device was only the first voice. After that, the institution spoke for him. Adrian Vale is still in prison. His sentence will keep him behind bars until at least 2030. He has given interviews through lawyers, but he has never explained exactly how he obtained the first contractor credentials. He insists there was no second person. Police remain unconvinced. One of the 3 contractor accounts connected to the same recovery number belonged to an employee who left Eastbridge 2 weeks before the incident. That employee denied helping Vale. No charges were filed. The question remains open. Was Vale alone? Was the airport betrayed from inside? Or did the system create so many forgotten accounts that nobody needed to betray anyone? The game is over. Or is it? Because the next time you stand beneath an airport departure board, the screen may show your gate, your flight, in the correct time. You may hear a calm announcement telling you where to walk. You may see an employee wearing the right vest, carrying the right badge, using the right words. And you will assume the information is real because everyone around you is acting as if it is real. That assumption is the invisible infrastructure beneath modern life. We use it every day. At the airport, at the bank, in our inboxes, on the phone. Adrian Vale did not need to control the entire airport. He only needed to control the story the airport told itself. And for 22 minutes, that story was enough to move 31,000 people. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more investigations into the hackers, fugitives, and impossible operations that expose the hidden weaknesses of powerful systems. Leave a like if you want to see more stories about social engineering and the people who defeat security without ever touching a firewall. And if you want to watch another case where one ordinary person made an entire institution believe something that was completely false, click the next video. Because sometimes the most dangerous breach is not the one that opens a locked door. It is the one that convinces everyone the door was never locked at all.